We've all seen the YouTube videos where they put the best sommeliers to the test and say that even they can't tell the difference between a cheap and an expensive glass of wine. So is there really a difference between cheap and expensive wine?
We're going to put it to the test, testing everything from about a $5 bottle to over a $100 bottle. And I'm going to tell you what my problem is with most of those videos and what they get wrong. Next on Fact Bites.
Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you are up to date whenever we post a new video. And if you like today's video, give us a thumbs up or leave us a comment below with some of your favorite wines. Do you like expensive wine, or do you, like me, enjoy a cheap Champagne Tuesday?
And we are not sponsored by any wineries. We're not saying that any specific wine is better than another wine. That's not the point of this. Wine is all about enjoying whatever you like, whether that is a $3 bottle of wine or that's a $200 bottle of wine. It is extremely subjective. So I actually like wine. I know some people are beer people, some people are whiskey people. Wine is more of my thing. I can usually tell the difference, so it'll be very interesting to see kind of how this test goes today. But I know everyone wants to see us start tasting these. Before we get into that, we wanted to really kind of explain what makes certain wines cheap, like what you'd find in the grocery store aisle, and what makes certain wines more expensive, because it's not them just putting an expensive label on the bottle. I mean, that is part of it, but there's a lot that goes into it.
So there are several factors that go into the price of a bottle of wine. So let's start with the grapes. First, it's important to keep in mind that grapes are grown in a vineyard, but turned into wine at a winery. Some wineries buy their grapes so they can have a winery without a vineyard, and some wineries grow their own grapes, and some do a combination of both. You'll often see estate grown and bottled on the label if a winery both grows and produces their own wine.
And speaking of that label, what you see on that label is somewhat dictated by law. So if it says Napa Valley in there, most of the wine in that bottle had to have been grown in Napa Valley. If it says just California, that means that wine was grown in California, but not a specific area. Some of the major brands, like those you find in your grocery store aisle, are sourced from large commercial vineyards, and the wine is often produced in a factory setting. These wineries produce their wine in bulk by the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of cases per year. Many commercial vineyards are large, hundreds of acres, and they are machine harvested, meaning the grapes are pulled off the vine by tractors and machinery. Far less labor intensive than smaller wineries.
And the smaller producers tend to hand harvest grapes at their optimal ripeness. Picks, as they're called, can take place over several weeks. Winemakers often test fruit to determine exactly when it should be picked. Some of it is science, some of it comes from experience, and picks can often focus on just certain blocks or sections of a vineyard. This is a big part of quality control. Hand harvesting is also gentler on the grapes, and fewer leaves and other debris make it in with the grapes. Machine harvesters can pick up all sorts of debris, which is then sorted out at the winery. Hand harvesting can take dozens of workers. Machine harvesting takes a small handful, so the labor costs are significantly lower. Machine harvesters also move much faster, so it's easy to see why a hand-harvested bottle of wine can be more expensive than a machine-harvested bottle of wine.
Smaller wineries tend to produce wine in small batches. So grapes come into the winery normally within hours of harvest. They're destemmed, sorted, and then pressed. Once the grapes are processed, they're loaded into fermentation tanks, and that's where different techniques can kind of come into play, but essentially this is the process of turning the grapes into wine.
Less expensive mass-produced wines will often go from this step directly to bottling, whereas more expensive wines, depending on the grape, can go into oak barrels or stainless steel for aging. Fine wines tend to use French or American oak, and many will use new barrels, or mostly new barrels, for each vintage. One standard barrel holds about 25 cases of wine, or 300 bottles. Barrels from the best cooperages can run about $1,500 each. The barrel alone adds about $5 to the price of the wine.
Some wines, for example, Cabernet Sauvignon, will often age at a winery for 1 to 2 years. That means the wine is held back from the consumer for a couple of years. It takes space to store all that wine, and the wineries will have 2 to 3 vintages stacked up waiting for release. So why do they do this? Well, grape varietals like Cabernet make awesome, well-structured wines. Very enjoyable, they go great with a steak, but they can be quite tannic when they're young. So tannins in wine, that's that mouth puckering, your teeth are sticking to your lips and your gums type of feel that you get when you drink a red wine where it feels very dry in the mouth. Aging wine helps smooth that out, and that's what those oak barrels also help achieve.
Another major factor of cost is where the vineyards are located. Napa Valley is some of the most expensive real estate for growing wine. 1 ton of Cabernet Sauvignon grapes from Napa County costs about $8,000. And that's just the average. Some highly desirable vineyards are more. By comparison, in neighboring Sonoma County, a ton of Cabernet grapes averages about $3,000 per ton. 1 ton of grapes is about 2 barrels of wine, so 600 bottles. So the raw grapes cost about $14 per bottle in Napa. Add that to the cost of the barrel aging and we're at $19. If you're producing a premium quality wine, you'll want a nice bottle and a good quality cork to keep your wine secure. A good cork can cost $1 to $2 a piece. Add a few bucks in for a good bottle and we're up to $25.
It's easier to see why a handcrafted wine could cost more than your $5 grocery store wine that is made by the millions of bottles. Many Napa wineries will produce fewer than 5,000 cases of wine per year. By comparison, Ernest and Julio Gallo, the largest wine producer in the world, produced an estimated 75 million cases of wine last year. They own major brands such as Barefoot, many of the other brands you'll see in your grocery store aisle. Smaller production wines can also become more expensive if they have a big name winemaker associated with making their wine, a reviewer or reviewers give it a good score, and if the wine becomes highly collectible. It's the philosophy of supply versus demand.
The most collectible wines often won't show up at your local supermarket or wine shop. Many of those wineries sell their wines direct to customers via clubs or allocations. This makes them highly desired commodities, and often they sell on the secondary market for much higher prices. For example, Screaming Eagle from Napa Valley retails for about $2,500 per bottle. If you're lucky enough to be on their allocation list, you pay half that price. Is it the best wine? Well, that's subjective, but it has a cult following, and that's why the price is so high.
The wine industry has price categories that give you an idea of what you get for what you spend. We actually took some of these numbers and these price categories from Wine Folly. If you've never seen Wine Folly, their YouTube channel or their website, it's great educational content. If you're a wine lover, they have books and all sorts of helpful information. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I'm going to pull this from her, and she did some great research to kind of price these, and I completely agree with kind of what she did. If you're buying wine under about $4, that's considered like an extreme value wine. It's just bulk wine that has absolutely no distinction to it. You're just literally drinking alcoholic grape juice at that point. $4 to $10 is value wines. These are bulk wines with some quality control and generally came from larger regions, more well known, from a producer you may recognize on the label. $10 to $15 is popular premium wines. These can be single varietal and blend wines made in large production. Single varietal means Cabernet Sauvignon. It's going to be predominantly that grape. In the United States, it's in most areas, it means it's at least 75% Cabernet to put that name on the label. $15 to $20 is a premium wine. These are good quality wines with a hint of the region where they came from in the terroir. This means that, let's say it's a Pinot Noir, it will probably taste like Pinot Noir, and you may even be able to identify the region where it's from.
So $20 to $30 and you're into the super premium wines. These are handmade wines from large and medium producers. You'll find some really enjoyable bottles in this price range. $30 to $50 is ultra premium wines. Handmade, great tasting, made by producers big and small. These wines may be cellar worthy. Basically meaning if you stick them in your basement for a couple of years, they'll get better with time. $50 to $100 is luxury wines. These are excellent wines from top locations and well-known producers. $100 to $200 is super luxury. Wines from top producers and prime locations. $200 plus is icon wines. These are the pinnacle or flagship wines, highly sought after and collectible.
So 200 may sound like a lot, but let's take Napa Valley, one of the most prized wine regions in the United States. They make a very small percentage of the wine from California, even though California is the largest producer in the country. They make a very small percentage. $200 doesn't even get you into the top wines from Napa Valley. You're going well above that to get to like the top 10 most expensive wines from Napa Valley. So it just goes to show you some regions, that is a big part of why the wine is so expensive.
So what does all of this come down to, and can you really tell the difference in a blind taste test? Well, blind taste testing is actually a great way to improve your knowledge of wine because you are relying entirely on your senses and not on a label or a brand.
In sommeliers, and especially master sommeliers, which is like the top tier, to get that designation, they have to blind taste and they have to get it right. So, or get it mostly right. So there's definitely characteristics of certain wines that if you drink enough wine, you'll start to realize that's a good Pinot Noir, or that's a good Cabernet, or that's a good Grenache or Syrah, or whatever you like to drink. And I highly encourage, if you do like wine and want to get into wine, the more you taste and the more you drink, the better you're going to appreciate it and the more you're going to enjoy it, just because you're going to know when you go somewhere, you'll know, oh, I like this type of wine, so I want to drink that type of wine.
Right.
So let me get into what drives me nuts about YouTube videos that tend to do these taste tests. Now, you will find a few of these blind tastes done by a few really good wine experts on YouTube, and they do a great job at it. But my biggest complaint is when they put people down in front of a table like this that taste test wine who never drink wine, know absolutely nothing about wine, and they're drinking out of like a solo cup. No offense to solo cups, they're great for, drinking beer out of a keg at a party, but not drinking wine. Like, wine needs to be in a wine glass, and if you drink enough wine, you will kind of learn the difference in why wine tastes so much better out of a wine glass. The big part of it is because the aroma that you get off of wine is a big part of the tasting experience. So if you're drinking a high quality wine, but you're drinking out of a plastic cup, it's probably gonna taste like a plastic cup. Whereas if you put it in a glass like this, where you have room to actually open up the aromatics and like smell what the wine smells like, it's going to taste a lot better. Like when you eat a hamburger and you smell the food, that hamburger tastes better because it smells good.
Right.
Wine is exactly the same way. You need your sense of smell to be able to taste wine. Shall we jump into tasting?
Let's do it.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we have 3 wines labeled A, B, and C. We're going to taste them A, B, and then C.
Okay.
And then I want you to determine what your favorite is, which one you think is the cheap one, the expensive wine, and then the medium wine.
Cool.
Okay? And kind of what I do is these have been open for about an hour. Red wine, especially, so these are all Cabernet. We're not mixing grape varietals because that's my other kind of pet peeve with how some of these tastings go is, if you're going to compare wines blind side by side, I'd like to be able to at least know we're tasting. And you don't have to know the grape varietal, but you're comparing apples to apples. You're not comparing, And then there's Cabernets that come from France. There's Cabernets that come from Australia. There's, these are all New World, so they're all from the United States.
Okay.
But I won't tell you anything more other than that and where they're from.
Okay.
So let's try it.
All right.
Interesting. By the way, so swirling the wine opens up the aromatics. That's why you want a glass like this. If you don't want to, if you haven't swirled wine before and you don't know how to do it, just put it on the table. It's super easy. Like, it's not difficult.
No,
it really isn't.
It is not.
And when you see people like do this with wine, it's kind of ridiculous. If you're looking for the tiers, which is the you see the wine, that basically is an indication of the alcohol content of the wine. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. What you really want to do is you want to take your wine and you want to put it up against a white piece of paper because you can kind of see what the color is. And that's how you kind of determine, you know, how old the wine is, or there's other things you can kind of tell from that as well. We're not going to,
Okay.
that's for another video because this is going to be way too long. Okay. It smells like wine.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I think it smells like though. There's something like, I don't want to say artificial.
Oh, okay.
You have to tell me what you think.
All right. I don't know that I know that much about wine to make a decision on that. I think it smells like, it does not smell cheap to me.
Okay. It's a new one. Okay. Interesting. By the way, if you taste anything truly horrible, there is a spit bucket over there.
Oh, good to know.
Yes. This smells truly horrific. Like rubbing alcohol. That at least smelled like, it smelled like dark fruit. I could smell like a little bit of like some black cherry and maybe a little bit of oak in it.
Yeah.
I mean, the color of it's good. But man, oh my God, it smells really...
I feel like I'm looking at the legs
The
on
tears?
it in comparison to the first one that we drank, and this one looks like it might be less alcoholic.
It did not taste as bad as it smelled. I don't know if I would say... I would not know if I would say this tastes like Cabernet. I drink a lot of Cabernet, so I can usually identify it. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, interesting.
I thought it was definitely brighter and more like grape juice like than
Okay.
the first one we drank.
Interesting. So definitely lots of black fruit. I smell the oak.
This definitely has more of an aroma than either of the other two. Like the other two smelled like wine. This smells like it has other flavors in it.
Very interesting.
I'd say C had a much more complex flavor than the other two.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, if you can't tell, I am less of a wine expert than Ryan is.
This I would drink a glass of. I probably would drink a glass of this as well. I would not drink this. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
I would definitely say my order of preference is the same as yours, C, A, and then B.
So my score is, I am going with B being the cheapest bottle. It's lacking, it just smells like something that came out of a juice box, not a wine. Just because of the texture and the quality of the tannins and the winemaking, I'm going to go with C being the most expensive, and that puts A as the mid-tier bottle.
And that's essentially what my classification would be. C definitely tasted like more thought and work had gone into it. B definitely tasted like something I would pick up at a grocery store. Or a gas station.
Here are our 3 bags, our 3 wines. So we both thought B was the cheap one. So let's try B first and see if I'm right, and see if you're right. We are.
Hey!
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. This is about a $6 bottle of Barefoot, and it says it's Cabernet from California, which means the grapes had to come from California.
It doesn't say where in California.
It doesn't say where. I mean, there's thousands of acres of grapes. Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it tastes like Cabernet. We both said A was probably the medium bottle.
Yeah.
So first, if I didn't say price-wise, the Barefoot was about $6.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that say A? I can't read it from back here.
I can't read it from back there either.
Okay. So this is 1858 Cabernet from Paso Robles, which is the region of California where the wine is from. And this is produced by Camus. They're famous for their wine in Napa Valley. This is about $30 a bottle.
Okay.
So I think we both, like I said, we were going to taste from like $5 to $100. Yeah. So we got that one right too. It's interesting.
It's not a bad one.
It's not bad.
I drink
it's
it.
a little, yeah, it's a little sweet for my taste, but I think it's pretty good wine. And I use a tool called Cellar Tracker. I'll link to it on the screen. Cellar Tracker users are just, it's a pool of people who, collect wine and use it and stuff. People can put their own ratings in there. Mm-hmm. That wine actually rates pretty well. So not bad. And you can find that at a lot of stores around the country. And then the final wine is the Mascot from Napa Valley. This wine is made from the younger vines at the Harlan Estate, which if you don't know anything about wine, Harlan is kind of a legendary wine from Napa Valley. It sells for about $1,000 a bottle. This is their wine that they make that sells at about a tenth that cost. Retails for about $130 a bottle.
Okay.
Beautiful wine. This is actually their current release, and it's 2014, and it's 2019 when we're making this video. They hold their wine for several years before they release it. It's all aged in oak. It's a beautiful wine. They make, I can't remember the exact number, but they don't make a lot of it.
Okay.
So those are the three wines. We're at $5, $30, and $130. What did you think? You got it right?
I got it right, so that's really exciting.
Isn't it?
It is a little depressing that the most expensive bottle is the best one, because I don't have the wine budget to be buying $100.
Yeah, so, and I didn't tell you what these wines were going to be beforehand, did I?
Not.
Okay.
You did not.
All right. So that was completely an honest assessment on Julia's part. Cabernet is a difficult wine to buy cheap. If you have a smaller wine budget, do not go Cabernet. There are great red blends, which means they're blending a few different red grapes. You'll hear Rhone varietals. You'll hear other blends that are out there. You'll spend less on those.
Right.
You can find a great bottle of wine for $30.
Yeah.
That you'll enjoy and will go well with dinner if you're date night, anything like that. Wine is not. If you are going to just party and have fun and drink, wine is probably not the right pick. If you want to enjoy what you're drinking.
Right.
It's just not really, yes, there are really inexpensive bottles of wine you can get. Mm-hmm. But if the cost per ounce of wine versus beer, other things, you're going to spend more for something that's good. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this blind tasting and comparison between cheap and expensive bottles of wine.
If you liked today's episode, remember to give us a like or hit subscribe so you are up to date whenever we release a new fact-based video. And if you have an idea for another episode that you'd like us to dig in on, leave us a comment below.
Behind the scenes, if you saw us looking at crazy things today while we were filming this video, it's because my dogs are running around.